Good morning, everybody. What if Salesforce could transform scientific data collection the way it does business? We're in day 2 of Dreamforce. We all saw Benioff's keynote yesterday and all the amazing stuff that Salesforce does, right? We saw the State Farm commercials, and we saw the Louis Vuitton stories, and great things that businesses are doing with Salesforce and the platform. And so really we asked this question: could we do the same for scientific data collection and all the things that impacts, right? Scientific research impacts our social and mental behaviors. It impacts drug research and disease research. Those are important things that we can really bring the power of the platform to. But we have to be careful, because with every advance we take in automation and technology, we have to make sure that we preserve the integrity of the research we're doing. We can't bring any biases into the data. We can't bring assumptions into the data. We have to be very careful that we can replicate it. So we want to be very careful when we take these steps forward. But earlier this year, we worked together to take this journey together and see if we could do this transformation. My name is Edward Schlicksup. I'm an engagement director for IBM, and I help run our federal US practice. And I worked with Felicia here.
I'm Felicia LeClaire. I'm a senior fellow, emphasis on the senior, at NORC at the University of Chicago. We are a research affiliate of the University of Chicago, and mostly what we do are large contracts for the federal government. And my role primarily is in managing large data collection. I've been at it a very long time, 30 years, been managing small and large data collections for the University of Notre Dame and the University of Michigan, where I was on the faculty. And so my experience with technology has been longstanding. Edward and I were chuckling about the fact that I worked on mainframes when I was in graduate school and was the only one able to save a client problem with a mainframe at the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. So for me, this has been a really interesting experience to meet technology writ large. And frankly, Dreamforce scares the living daylights out of me. So if I'm shaking up here, it's because this is crazy.
So this project that we worked on started with you. This came to you. So tell us about how the whole thing came to be.
Sure. So we have clients at the National Institutes of Health, and one of those clients wanted to start a very large, what's called a cohort study, to recruit people from big healthcare systems like Henry Ford and Kaiser Permanente to participate in a long-term study of cancer precursors. And they wanted to collect 5 to 7 types of data. So survey data, data from electronic medical records, specimens, tissue, blood, urine, saliva, and also follow up the respondents to record systems, the National Death Index and the National Cancer Registry. And they want to recruit 200,000 people over a 10-year period. The complications here are enormous, okay? So this volume and complexity of data and the longitudinal nature of it, which is you have to stay engaged with people over a very long period of time and keep asking them to do things. Now, mind you, the incentive on this is about $25, and you have to answer questionnaires, you have to go get your blood drawn, you have to provide a urine sample, you spit in a tube at home. So this is a very large infrastructure problem. More importantly, secondary data, which is the data products, then would be used by other people who have no knowledge of the project, and they need documentation and transparency into the data process. So I will be honest with you, we have a services contract, which is basically we do what our client asks us to do. And they said, we want to evaluate the use of a CRM to do this cohort work. And my first thought was, what the heck is a CRM? You can tell I'm old school. Because they wanted to keep all of the respondent engagement on a digital platform. Normally, we do lots of longitudinal studies. I run a very large one for, on Medicare beneficiaries. We touch them. We are there at their homes every 3 months, and that's how we keep them engaged. And they wanted to do it all digitally, so they wanted a CRM. So I said, okay, let's do it.
What's your normal tool set? If you're not using a CRM, what do you typically start with to solve for these issues?
You're about to embarrass me, right? So our infrastructure are built with tools, right? So these are all familiar tools, all reliable tools, you know, to communicate with our respondents. We use Outlook. We analyze data in SAS. We set it up on SQL servers. We use standard survey software. We do our engagement with our field interviewers and other interviewers through a footprints ticketing system. We use a Pitney Bowes mailer to send our mailers out, and everything gets organized around spreadsheets, right? So you can imagine the kind of infrastructure. I call it a big Rube Goldberg machine, and probably none of you are old enough to know what Rube Goldberg machines, oh good, somebody, thank God.
They're hip again.
So it is, and we run a lot of our projects because these are familiar technologies which we understand how they work, and we can document every stage. And now you can show the other thing.
Yeah, there's one tool missing, right?
Yeah, duct tape. And the duct tape are my 40 lovely staff who duct tape this all together and keep it moving. And you can imagine that the duct tape is not the best way to do this. So when we heard about this project and the development, we really began to think about, is there a place that we can do this better? Because the leakage across the elements here, so I see data as a leaky pipeline. And the leaky pipeline is a really big problem for scientific research because you lose data quality at each stage. And all of these pieces duct taped, no offense to duct tape, it leaks.
So you had the problem of scale, you had a tool set that wasn't going to work. How did you move forward to get to our project start?
So because our client had pushed us to CRM, NIH had a series of I guess their sales activity. We sent them a bunch of sort of elementary requirements and then 3 Salesforce equivalents, which was Microsoft Dynamics, Salesforce, and ServiceNow, took basic requirements and did a presentation to NIH, our clients, as well as us. David Franti, who is the federal Salesforce person for NIH, and he and an engineer came and presented. And honestly, it was like seeing the light, you know, where the whole world just opens up to you. He had done what would have taken me and my staff 6 months. They did in about 3 days. And so our client, while anxious to use a CRM, was also anxious about Salesforce. As you know, the licensing structure, the lack of visibility, it's not technology we know, and they got wobbly. And we were so convinced at NORC that it would work that I proposed that we do a proof of concept for them. You know, just scale it back, keep them from being afraid. It would allow us to learn the technology because I've built a lot of technology as the business owner, I guess is the phrase. And I know how to communicate technical needs in the technology I understand. I did not understand how to do that in Salesforce. So for me, it was also risk mitigation in that I could see how it got made, think through the parts, and then be better for my client to help them through this CRM. So we hired IBM, Blue Wolf, to do this proof of concept with us, in part because they're about 10 blocks away from us in Chicago, and in part because it was a human scale for us. I felt like other vendors were already, what I didn't realize is once you appear in someone's radar, all the CRM vendors come at you, and people were calling me, and I'm like, no, I don't know what to do with this. And Blue Wolf took a very low-key approach to us, and we started this proof of concept last spring, I think, right?
Earlier this spring. So this was the methodology that we brought to NORC to build out this proof of concept. Very heavily agile-based, very rapid. We came in with a small team that we grew as we needed to build on more functionality. But this was a pretty rapid time frame that we built a lot of things. So over the first 2 weeks, we figured out what were the use cases that were going to speak most to our clients at NIH that had both the most highest value from a mission standpoint, but also some technical complexity that we needed to sort out. The other thing we did was define terminology to get the gap between our language across a technology provider and a research community. For example, case management in Salesforce means customer support tickets and the assignment of that case record and the resolution, tracking it through the workflow. Case management is something very different in the research world, where that is a participant and the interaction with them to go out and perform the interview and collect. So that there were gaps in terminology that we had to clarify. We then took our personas that we would be involving in the proof of concept. There are a lot of discrete different groups of people that would be touching the system and interacting with them. We built our user stories around those various personas. And then we also spent time at this stage defining our security model and our security architecture because of the sensitive data that would be populating the system and the different persona parties that would be accessing it, federal regulations dictating who can see what parts of the data and how much of it. And so really understanding how we had to architect around those different security rules. And then we dove in. We did 6 one-week sprints in rapid, agile fashion, very deeply engaged, working very closely with Felicia's team to rapidly build, test, show, and react to that to get to a model that looks a lot like this. And so our processes that we focused on were participant recruitment being very key early on to make sure that we're pulling in the correct sample of people, that we are tracking those interactions. There's also a lot of attrition and retention that we want to focus on to make sure that we get them into the funnel and we keep them engaged along the way. Consent is a very important step along the way that has to be continually verified with each interaction, so documenting when they consented to participate in the study. And then enrollment, which is the baseline gathering of data for where they are at the start. And these are 3 very key processes that really set the foundation of the study, the process, the protocols, and the foundational data within the platform. Our personas that we focused on, of course, are study participants. They would also be accessing the platform through self-service engagement. We had our independent health clinic sites who would be not only supplying the participants, but also engaging in a lot of the survey and the appointments and all the biospecimen collections. We had, of course, NORC, who was providing technology support, running a lot of the survey components of it, and then our study sponsors at the NIH as well, having the top-down overview and doing the data analysis on all of the data that we collected along the way. We built on the Salesforce Lightning platform, and we used the Salesforce GovCloud. That is Salesforce's dedicated instances for the federal government that achieves a FedRAMP moderate version, so we wanted to make sure that we had a secure platform. We used some conceptual ideas from Salesforce Health Cloud as well, because it very closely mirrors some of the processes in the data model that we wanted to capture within here. We built around a data model we called Participant 360. And this is all the data that cycles around the participant, has that centric data collection and view of that person. We used Service Cloud and Marketing Cloud to drive the workflow around that engagement. And we had those two platforms communicating, integrated, so that we could always see the level of campaigns, the interactions involved. We had communities for both our participants, for self-service channel, and we also had a community for our IHCSs so that they could interact as well. And then we had analytics on top of it, and we used Qualtrics and DocuSign and SpringCM as our third-party app partner. So we had a very rich and detailed platform that we built out. On the right, you'll see our kind of future state, scalable architecture that when scaled to full capacity, we would include an ESB, such as a MuleSoft, to better orchestrate the data layer. And I think most importantly is a data warehouse for archiving and master data, as well as Tableau for analytics to help drive the overall top-down view of the data that we had collected. And this is a view of the Participant 360 and a good sense of the rich data that we were collecting in a single place about our study participants. So we had the electronic medical records from integration back to the IHCSs so that we could have their baseline PHI in the system, all their contact info and their contact preferences, all the interaction activity. So every email they got, every email that they clicked but they opened but didn't click through, forms that they started, any customer support tickets or times they called in to the center, all that gathered there. All of our biospecimen data. So when they did and they make those medical drops, that we had the data in the system from there, but not just the data, but the metadata. When did we send it out? When did they return it? When did we process it? All the data around the biospecimen itself. And then the questionnaire and data forms. So using Qualtrics and SpringCM and DocuSign to generate those forms and those surveys. That data then replicated back into Salesforce, lived in Salesforce, so that we could view it and report on it and analyze it, but also be able to call up those forms to validate consent, for example, within each engagement. So we spent that 11 weeks building out the platform, the solution, and we proved out a lot of technical concepts, but mission-wise, what kind of gains, what kind of outcomes did we have? What did we solve for?
So Edward and I have gotten to know each other very well, and we have very different opinions about the value of Salesforce. For him, it's customer engagement. For me, it's data quality, right? So my primary goal is data quality. That's my job. And what Salesforce provided for me in demonstration, not in actuality, because this is a proof of concept, is that the worst enemy of high quality data is loss from stage to stage, or perturbation from stage to stage, where your pieces don't quite align and you have to build a middle layer, right, to make them align. What fascinated me and made me commit to 4 days in San Francisco before Thanksgiving is that ability to integrate and enrich data. For me, that's extraordinary. Our tools in science are quite rich in their own way, but the ability to create system-wide integration across all the steps, including the respondents, the behavior of our partners at the integrated healthcare systems, and Salesforce also generates data, and we call it paradata. And that generated data about the touches on the emails, or the metadata around the phone calls or emails or texts, for us are sources of efficiency gain because we analyze them in order to understand which of the respondents we're most likely to keep, which of the respondents we can convert to consented respondents. And so that enriched holistic approach to data was incredible. It also, the speed is amazing. So that 11-week period, I would be retired if we tried to do that, and I'm close, but not that close. It was incredibly efficient, and the way in which the application, or whatever it's called, was envisioned with an operational view of every actor, right? We don't build that way. We build in order to make it work. They built in order to make it work for everyone. That was amazing. And finally, for me, as a federal contractor, security is critical, especially with PHI, and the ability to segment view and to secure both at rest and in transit is critical to what we do. I would have had to assure them of that and demonstrate that regardless of the platform or the technology I used. Salesforce makes it easier to get to the element level, and also that everybody in the system has a designated role, and it's very clear. And the flexibility, because remember one thing about scientists, they are as unpredictable as San Francisco's weather. They will add something, they will take something away, they'll add things that I can't do, they'll add things at the last minute, and most sort of on-premise, gerrymandered technology really suffers when those things get added, because you then have to do a translation, you have to have enough view through the respondent data to understand how this piece is going to attach. And when we did this proof of concept, I looked at that future state and didn't have nightmares. I actually thought we might actually be able to do this in a timely manner. So that's what I gained from this sort of confidence that the quality of scientific data would be enriched enormously by that integrated platform approach. And all of, I think of Salesforce as like a solar system, right? Where you have planets kind of orbiting, and they have, I know, it's the campground, it's diverting me. Anyway, you have spaceships that connect them, right? That there will be an expanding planet, and that I'll always be able to do what I want to do, because there will always be someone building something that I can just attach to my solar system. And that kind of flexibility in scientific infrastructure doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. It's all duct tape. So that's what I gained.
Excellent. And we went from this, all the various different tools, unconnected, not talking to each other, not working, to this.
Isn't that cool? That was my idea.
So we achieved a lot. We had a lot of great success with what we did. But as I mentioned earlier at the top of the session, there's still some things we need to conquer within this idea. And so there are these standards within science, and especially around data with science, that is known as visibility, transparency, and replicability. And I always think back to, it made sense when I thought about like my second grade science class, and they're like, you create your hypotheses and you test it, and you have to do it over and over again to get the same outcome. This is very much the same thing. So you've got to be able to set up your data infrastructure so that everything is completely visible, transparent, and replicable. And so what this means is visible. You've got to be able to see all the data. You've got to be able to access it and have it available. Transparency talks about the process of the data. So every time you make an update to the data, or you add data, or you do any manipulations with the data, you've got to understand and document and know what that is, so that you've got every step clearly mapped out. Replicability then says, all right, now I take that initial data set that I started with, and I can repeat all those steps that I've transparently documented and get the same outcome. And I can do that over and over again so that I can validate my findings at the end of the study. That's very important. That's how we make sure that the findings are valid. And this becomes a challenge within the Salesforce ecosystem, because it's a new tool, because it's not familiar to the research community how you might accomplish all of these things. You might think about visibility. For us, we think about our global search bar, and we're going to run a report and report builder. These are tools that as Salesforce users, we're very comfortable with to say, yes, we can achieve visibility. Whereas the research community might be more comfortable doing a SQL query into the SQL server to pull back data in a very raw form. So making that leap of comfort to understand that this is how we would achieve visibility on a different platform in a different way, but still meeting the standards. And I think that transparency is upon us as the service implementers to make sure that we are documenting steps and we're educating people around how the system generates all the paradata around the initial data set and how that will impact it and change the data. Replicability is perhaps the toughest nut to crack in terms of how do we then take what has been a customized configured system and be able to move the data and replicate all of those steps and processes there. It's why open source is attractive to the scientific research community, but we feel that there are ways that we can achieve this within Salesforce. You'll also sometimes hear these standards referenced as FAIR, which is specific to data collection at the NIH. It stands for findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And so all of this data has to meet all those 4 standards that we generate in the project in order to meet their qualifications and their validity.
Would you say that again? I want to take note of that, the acronym.
It's FAIR. It's findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable.
And you can find the strategic plan for NIH. It was released by their CIO on their main website.
And so it's just a matter of taking what we know about the Salesforce platform and applying it to those standards and getting comfort with it. So every year, Blue Wolf releases a report, our own survey of Salesforce customers that we call the State of Salesforce. You can pick it up at our booth, download a digital copy, but really we like to survey the Salesforce ecosystem at large and understand what people are working on in the platform, where their priorities are, where their investments are, what's next, what they feel, what they've succeeded and what they failed with. And going through this year's report, which we just released a couple days ago, there were a couple of statistics that jumped out. I wanted to just get your input on these. So the first one that jumped was that 77% of marketing teams who had integrated their marketing platform with their customer service platform were able to achieve their target ROI. And this was one of our key proof of concept components. Felicia, talk a little bit about the importance of having those 2 systems talking together during this POC.
So I'll try to talk you through what we do in survey work and how Marketing Cloud changed what we do. And my organization has its own technology, but before I retire, we're going to do this. Marketing Cloud allowed us to build cadences of contact, right? So respondents require you to engage them and engage them repeatedly. And there's lots of research in the methodological community about how many times you contact, at what cadence, for what reason. And one of the things that takes an enormous amount of time in traditional survey work is getting that cadence right, having enough data to assess what cadence will produce a respondent, right? And we built a variety of cadences for all of the contacts. So not just the initial recruitment contact, but also the consent contact, the contact to get your appointments done, all of that engagement, which we would have done by driving spreadsheets with Outlook, or we would have driven from a survey platform like Qualtrics directly, we could do with Marketing Cloud and then capture all the data in Service Cloud and analyze that data to make it more efficient. And that really is the other part of my job, other than building the infrastructure, is continuously making it more efficient, and Marketing Cloud allowed us to do that.
So IT teams are starting to do a lot more with AI on the Salesforce platform, and these are 3 areas where we see the scale start to generate. So employee knowledge, analytics, machine learning libraries, and typically they're investing a little bit more around the knowledge, and then analytics and machine learning as they prioritize how they scale AI. Would you agree with that assessment, or how would you invest in AI on this POC?
So Edward's used to my slightly sarcastic approach to business language, and AI to me seems to be an oxymoron, but nevertheless, AI for me means the ability to take unstructured stuff and make it structured. In the survey world, we start with structured stuff, but people don't behave themselves, and they give us a lot of unstructured stuff that we just kind of go away. What AI does for us in the form of machine learning is allow us to learn from all that ancillary information. So on another project that I run, we have interviewers, and they comment on every single field in the instrument, every single field. And it's only recently we've been able to mine anything from that with AI, because we do this machine learning on those comments, and that's helped us improve our operations because we're listening to our interviewers, which we haven't in the past. So I would say that AI is where we're headed, and we're going to unstructure data and allow people to report on what they actually are rather than fitting them into boxes, which I'm okay with that, but other people aren't okay with the box thing.
Yeah, some of the natural language processing that we saw yesterday is really
amazing,
moving ahead very quickly. All right, and then the last one, so where the IT teams are investing, putting most of their dollars towards integration, followed by 360 customer view, followed by IT and business collaboration. Is that how you'd order it as well?
I wouldn't bother with any of the others. Integrating data for me is my job security. This is what I do every single day. I coordinate with people to integrate data across legacy platforms, across instrumentation from different sources. And so for me, integrating data, I know that everybody else uses Salesforce to reach people. For me, the magic is data integration and the ability to see the data integration and do it in real time. And I know I think I've drunk the Kool-Aid. I'm afraid now. Data integration will transform scientific research largely because the number of sources of data that we collect in scientific research has exploded, and our tool set has not kept pace with that. Because we're so busy in the substantive part of it, we don't have the wherewithal, and the NIH doesn't support infrastructure at the level that businesses do. They want the substantive research. So our tool set hasn't yet gotten to the point where it embraces what's in our heads. And Salesforce, oddly, comes as close as you can get in the current world to that level of integration and complexity. And it would allow us to build that massive infrastructure to understand human beings, their health, their future. And so for me, it's an amazing tool, and I have drunk the Kool-Aid, and now it's yours, Edward.
Yeah. We could help sell more Louis Vuitton bags, or we could help cure cancer.
Well, I don't know. Make your choice.
Well, don't leave that up to my wife. She'll pick the Louis Vuitton bag every time. Thank you all for being here. I wanted to open up, we've got about 5 minutes left, that we can do some Q&A. So any questions in the audience?
So have you used Einstein with your data models yet? Or is that just something that you saw and thought might be potential?
So to be honest with you, Einstein as a product is not something I yet understand. Most of our clients want the data in its natural state, right? So that's why we had a data warehouse to pull the data out. Tableau they will use to do preliminary looks, but most of this work gets done because they do genomics work, they do analytes from blood. So Einstein is not probably, we might use it to do efficiency metrics, but it wouldn't be the major engine.
Think back to like the transparency component of that. How does Einstein work? What's it doing with the data? That's where
I want to know the algorithms. I don't want to look at this thing the way you're looking at it, that sort of thing. Exactly, because you can't see it. Yep.
I came in a little late, so maybe you touched on this, but along the way, surprises, blockers, gaps, I mean, what were the hard edge things you discovered as you've gone through this?
So for me, it was language. We spent a lot, this is why Edward and I know each other better than we probably want to, is that we spent a lot of time translating. I really had no idea what he was talking about at least half the time. And he, I think, felt the same. And so it took a lot of sort of moving my head this way. And I think that's really our problem. I think there's a real culture problem and a language problem. And would you agree on that one?
I think the other one was methodology.
Yeah.
Yep. Getting in and thinking about this platform from the end user experience and thinking about it just from a functional technology agnostic component, I think was really impactful to your team.
Yeah, we had a lot of conversations because I have scientific methodology in my head and I know how to put pieces together. And they knew what they were doing and we didn't always connect. And there wasn't a lot of available literature or examples. There were a couple out there, but not enough so that we could figure out where it aligned. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yep. Yep.
Can you speak a little more about how you leveraged Qualtrics?
Sure. So of course, our client has this huge behavioral survey that starts it, and it's huge. Qualtrics has a link so that we could feed sort of demographic data in. We programmed Qualtrics in 4 modules and then connected it to Service Cloud?
Service Cloud, yeah. Service
Cloud, to pull in some data in real time. But the data was going to go its separate route to the data warehouse.
And Qualtrics is a FedRAMP cloud platform that has a Salesforce connector that we had to do some customization on to get it to pull the data over. But that was one of the engagement layers for the participants where they would get a link via email sent out through Marketing Cloud. When they clicked through the link, they'd come to the Qualtrics survey. We'd have identity verified through there, and then it would pass data back into the system.
Yeah.
Did you handle data anonymization inside Salesforce or?
Data anonymization? Is that what you said? So that's because it was a proof of concept. We hadn't yet gotten to the passing tokens, basically, through the API for recruitment. After consent, they could be fully identified, but getting them from touching the portal to consent, they needed to be anonymized, or in my world, it's de-identified. We hadn't yet figured that part out. Past consent, they can be fully identified, but we have to protect their PII, their PHI in Situate, and that's why I like Salesforce's security structure, because it allows us to make sure people don't see it if they shouldn't. Okay? All right.
All right.
We did it in time.
We did it.
Yay.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. Really
Thank you.
appreciate the questions coming out. Enjoy the rest of your Dreamforce.